CapitalFarmCredit.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Capital Farm Credit Wednesday Night Podcast, our weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week, what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And Dan, tonight we've got a special guest. We've got Russell Lucas, the head football coach of the Hamlin Pied Pipers, who won in dominating fashion Friday night in Albany.
Yeah, and I was out there for that game, and Hamlin just looked like a juggernaut. You got to see that a couple weeks ago with that game at Holly. This team playing really, really well, and Coach Lucas just has them rolling right now. And I'm just excited to talk to him about that. I'm excited to talk to him about a lot of things. I think he's one of our favorite guys to have on this show. He's one of the coaches that we really enjoy having on, a guy who we have a ton of respect for. Has done a remarkable job at Hamlin, not only getting them prepared to win games on the field, but really producing really good young men out there. So I'm excited to talk to him again. This is our third or fourth time to have him on, and there's a good chance with the way they're playing, we might have him on one more time this year before they're headed to Arlington possibly. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. I think it's going to be a good one, and I'm looking forward to talking about that Albany game too, because there's plenty to dissect from that performance.
Okay, before we jump into tonight's show, we want to thank our primary sponsor, Capital Farm Credit, with offices all over Texas, including Stanford and Abilene. Buy your own slice of Texas with Capital Farm Credit. Together, we're better. And with that, Dan, it's time to jump into last week's top football games. And right off the bat, we'll start with the Big Country Preps game of the week from last week that you attended, Dan. Normally, I take the Big Country Preps game of the week, but I wanted you to see this Hamlin ball club. I wanted you to see it up close and personal, and I think you came away as impressed with them as I was 2 weeks ago. Beating Albany in dominating fashion. I believe they held the lines to under 150 yards in total offense.
Yeah, no, and you kind of talked about it after seeing them beat Holly. But I think you do kind of need to see this team to realize and understand just how good it is and just how dominant it is. Yes, they held them under 150 yards, but Albany had 9 yards and 0 first downs in the first half on 14 plays. It was just dismantling really on that side of the football where Hamlin just really controlled this game with the defense, and then offensively they got on a roll where they scored on about 6 straight possessions. So this team is, I think, every bit as good as advertised, maybe better than we expected. I think you've got to be pretty darn excited if you're looking at this team as a Hamlin fan and as Coach Lucas. You got to be pretty excited about the possibilities it has, because I don't think it really has any limitations other than maybe injuries. If you have some injuries, that would maybe hurt this team, because there's not a whole lot of depth like a lot of teams at the Class 2A Division II level, but the players they have and the ones they're putting on the field are really talented. That's a team that plays really well, a very cohesive group, and they're just putting it on people right now. So it's going to be fun to watch just what this team can accomplish. And really, they've got a couple of more games on that schedule. I think that'll kind of prepare them well for the playoffs. So it's going to be a good time to get to see this team before the playoffs, and then to see how far they can go once they get there.
And we'll get into a little bit more detail about how Hamlin is doing when we talk to Coach Lucas a bit later. Another one of the ball games that we had on Friday night, which turned out to be a really fun ball game. I attended this one, Anson over Dublin, 44-28. And this is one of those games, Dan, where it looked like it was going to be a blowout early on. Anson was up 19-0 and then lost the momentum. And you know how tough this is. When a team loses the momentum and to regain it, to recapture it. It was 19-0. Suddenly it was 21-14. Dublin had all the momentum going into the locker room at the break, and Anson settled in and reclaimed control of the ball game and held Dublin off. It ended up being a pretty fun night, actually. This game lasted quite a while. I don't think it ended until about 10:45.
Yeah, I think you've got to be impressed so far with what Anson's put together, particularly when you look now at what some of those other teams are doing. Coleman got him a big win over Brady last week. Anson pretty well handled them, and then go and beat a Dublin team that's got some offensive weapons. So I think that Anson is going to be a fun one to follow going forward, because offensively they're doing some really big things. And I think the thing that may be separating this Anson team from some they've had in the recent past is that it looks like they're playing a little bit of defense too when they need to. I think that's going to be an important thing. If that team's going to do kind of reach its potential in the playoffs, they're going to have to be able to make stops when they need them. And it looks like maybe they're a little better equipped to do that. But so far, so good for him. I mean, what were some of the things that maybe stood out to you most about that Anson team that maybe you weren't expecting or weren't really ready for?
Well, style-wise, the team has changed. This is not the same type of Anson team that we've seen in recent years. It's a more ground-based team. Isaac Braun, their starting quarterback, is gone for the year now. So now they've gone with Dylan Pyle, who is a very capable athlete in that second-string role. But it's more of a running football team. They rushed for over 330 yards last week in this win over Dublin. They threw for 161. They can still throw the ball, and they're still up-tempo. But for the most part, they're focusing on a power running game to get them down the field and move the chain. So it's a different style of Anson team. Just as quick as far as tempo is concerned. They want to get up and down the field as fast as they can. But in terms of style, it is different.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's probably impressed me most is that they were able to transition from Brown to now to Dylan Pyle and really not lost a whole lot offensively. I think you're probably right. They probably had to shift more to maybe a ground-based offense. But they've been able to stay multiple through it, and really offensively they continue to roll. So that's been really impressive. And let's move to a team we just talked about, and let's talk a little bit about that Coleman win, a 15-12 win at home over Brady. That was a similar one in that you talk about kind of how momentum can be a big deal. Brady led that game at one point 12-0, was going for 2, and had a fumble get returned for a 2-point for a defensive 2-point conversion there. And that really changed momentum of the entire game. From there, really Coleman got going offensively, scored a couple of touchdowns, and come back to win 15-12 at home. A big win for Coleman, and a big win for Coach John Elder, who I think is starting to kind of get back to – it's going to be tough to get back to the level they were before this little rebuild, but I think they're getting back to a point to where they're going to be very competitive this year. And that win last week over Brady, to me, kind of shows that. Yeah,
they've got better numbers and better depth, and they're at 2AD1 now. They were playing at 3AD2 with lesser experience and numbers. Now they've got better numbers and more experience, and they're playing at a lower level. So yeah, I would expect them to have a much better season this year. I think they're going to take a step forward. And really, I mistimed my upset pick. I thought that last week, I thought 2 weeks ago, I thought Coleman might upset Anson. And they turned around, they upset Brady a week later. But we thought that Coleman had one of these games in them early on, sneaking up on somebody, and they pulled it off. It doesn't really surprise me.
No, I think you and I both thought that Coleman was going to be significantly improved this year. But I think this is the type of win that kind of shows the level they're at. Because Brady's rebuilding a little bit in terms of that they lost a big senior class, but they've still got some talent, and they're still expecting to be competitive. So to be able to come back in a game like that and beat them, I think is a really good sign for them. And they had a couple of guys really have big impacts for them. Rylan Gentry had a big game, ran for 85 yards. Devonar Roberson's a kid that's really turned into a playmaker for him. So I think that Coleman's finally starting to put some things together offensively. Defensively, I think they were a little ahead of last year of the offense. They're starting to find some weapons offensively. They're still playing relatively well defensively. That's going to be a tough team come district time, I think.
That's a playoff team, in my opinion. If they stay reasonably healthy, Coleman is going to get into the playoffs and maybe even knock a team or two out. I think they're going to be a team to reckon with.
Yeah, I think it'll depend a lot on seeding and matchups, but I definitely think that team is capable of getting to the playoffs and winning a game.
And with that, we'll move on to a Class 2A D1 matchup. The Haskel Indians chalked up their first win of the year against a ranked Cross Plains team. We did not see this one coming, did we?
No, this to me was a huge surprise. I think it was one of the bigger upsets in the state, I would say, because Cross Plains came into that one playing really well. Haskel was really struggling, particularly with ball security. And to come into that game and hold a talented Cross Plains offense under 250 yards, really bottle up their running game. Yeah, this one kind of came out of left field for me. I kind of wondered, and we had just written that big feature about the progress that Cross Plains program made, about getting ranked, all those things. That's one thing I think is kind of just part of a progression of a program. You've got to learn how to handle those types of expectations. Yes, you've got to learn how to handle that type of pressure. And I think in this case it may have gotten to them a little bit. I think this is their first time to ever be in that position for all of these kids, to where they're kind of the hunted. That's one thing that Coach Purvis was talking about.
Your fault.
I know. There probably are people that think that yeah, but I'll point to I also wrote a feature about the Comanche defense, and they did just fine. So I'll take half blame for that. But yeah, I think this is just one of those unfortunate deals where Cross Plains may have just kind of, the moment may have gotten to them a little bit. The good thing is, if you're going to have that type of loss, now's the time to do it. Get it out of the way. because this is a good, talented Cross Plains team. They've got a chance to do a lot of good things. They've got a lot of big moments ahead of them. Get this one behind you, move forward, and I think that this team will still have a very strong season. But to me, right now, the story is Haskel. That's a huge win for that program. I think this was one that Coach Hodnett's team really, really needed.
Well, one thing with this pick, and we both blew the pick, but it's easy to underestimate Haskel when they turn the ball over 11 times in their first 2 games. You know what I mean? That's 11 turnovers is going to make you look a lot worse than you really are. This is a better team than what that record and what those scores were showing. 11 turnovers in 2 games. I don't care who you are. If you put the ball on the ground that many times, you're going to get your rear end handed to you, and that's what happened. They cleaned that up, and actually they won on a turnover. The Silvas kid took a pick six back 35 yards to win that ball game to them with 1:17 to play. So they won it defensively by forcing a turnover. That's the big difference. This is a better Haskel team than what they've shown. And over the last couple of years, we can actually look back at Haskel's schedule and point to a particular game in their schedule where they turned it around. They got to get off these slow starts, and then all of a sudden they pick it up. And we especially saw that 2 years ago. And this might be the case with Haskel now. With this ball game here, because that's a good Cross Plains team that they beat.
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting thing, because Haskel, and it's not just been the football program. That's one thing that's interesting about the Haskel athletic program as a whole. You've seen it in baseball, you've seen it in boys basketball too, where they'll get off to slow starts against tough schedules, and then finally kind of the light bulb flips on for them, something clicks, and all of a sudden they start playing at a really high level. The one thing that's going to make it tough to see whether this is the case is they got Albany next, and they've got probably an angry Albany team next. So we're going to see just how good this Haskel team is this week. If they're going to if they can keep this one competitive, I think it will be a deal where they have turned the corner. But I think the thing that impressed me most about the win the other night was just the job the defense did, because and I think a lot of it is what you just mentioned. It's hard to see how good a defense is when the offense is continually putting them in really bad situations with turnovers. This time the offense cleaned that up, and the defense got to show what they were really capable of. And I thought to me, that's kind of the story. Is that I'm interested to see just kind of what kind of steps now Haskel can take forward.
And with that, let's move on to a Class 3A matchup. This was played on Saturday in Dublin. The Clyde Bulldogs picked up their first win of the year, beating Riesel 52-14. And really, what a step forward for Clyde. That's the fact that they won does not surprise me. The fact that they completely blew Riesel out did surprise me. They played really well Saturday.
Yeah, I thought this was a really big win for that team and for that program, just given the fact that they had kind of been beaten up on a little bit the first 2 weeks. But I think it's important to remember that the teams that beat them up were Cisco and Idalou, and they're going to do that to a lot of teams. This time, Clyde gets into a game with a team that doesn't have that type of talent and shows what they're capable of. Go and really dominate the game from start to finish. And I think it's a big moment for that team, because this is a very young team over at Clyde, particularly on the defensive side, and they really shined on that side of the football in this game over Riesel. They got held them to less than 220 yards, forced 4 turnovers, and then offensively they did some really special things. Austin Hastings had a huge game, rushed for over 190 yards. Quarterback Dylan Newman was extremely efficient, was just really ran that offense well. I think this can be that type of game that this young team can build on. So I'm excited to see what they do going forward. I think they've got a chance to really put some things together, and I think that this game could be the catalyst for that.
Well, the thing that really jumps off the page for me is the fact that Clyde rushed for almost 300 yards. And granted, they weren't playing Cisco or Idalou this time around, but anytime you run the ball and then add a passing game that's efficient with that bodes well. They're executing. They look good. They played really well. Newman was 10-12 for 118 yards. That's a great ball game, and he rushed for 72. So we'll see. I want to see how they perform against this Ballinger defense. Ballinger's been playing lights out defensively, so this is going to be an interesting test.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are really intriguing about this matchup with Ballinger, and that you're going to get to see whether that game against Riesel, who was undefeated going into that game. So this wasn't, kind of a weak opponent in that regard. That this was a team that had won a couple of games coming in, was confident, and Clyde still manhandled them. So I think the thing I'm eager to see is how both sides of the football can build on this. I think that Coach Scott Campbell has built a program at this point that you expect their defenses to be strong. So to get kind of whipped a little bit those first 2 weeks, I think this was probably a big confidence builder for them to have the type of defensive performance that they've kind of become accustomed to seeing over there. I'm eager to see what they can do now on that side of the football against a Ballinger offense that has a lot of weapons, and then to see offensively if they can take this performance where they were just so efficient and kind of carry that over. I think it's going to be tougher, obviously, against the Ballinger defense that's had the success that they have, but this will be a really good test for them, coming off their first win with a lot of confidence, a little bit of momentum. We'll see. I think if they can keep it competitive, I think that's going to be a good sign for them going forward.
And with that, it's just about time to look ahead at the top ball games in the big country for this week. But before we do that, we want to thank some of our sponsors, beginning with Capital Farm Credit, who brings you these Wednesday night podcasts free of charge throughout the school year. Also, Underwood's Cafeteria in Brownwood. As you're driving through Brownwood, take a look around for the big cowboy sign, and you'll find it some of the best home cooking in the big country. That is Underwood's Cafeteria, a landmark in the big country since 1946. And also for the love of the game broadcasting on our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of K-Lakes 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, KATX 97.7 FM out of Eastland, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and 98.5 KWBY FM out of Ranger. That is for the love of the game broadcasting. And finally, Phil Hill of the Abilene Realtors Group, big supporter of local athletics. If you're in the market, give Phil a call at 325-669-5153 or visit his website at philhillproperties.com. And with that, Dan, it's time to look ahead at the top ball games of the week. A number of teams are idle this week, and a number of our teams are traveling way out of the area. But we do have a few games close to home that if people want to jump in their car and go and take a look at, I think we've got some we can recommend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's some really interesting ones, including one involving a couple teams we've already talked about tonight, Anson at Hamlin. I think that's kind of an interesting game. You got two teams coming in unbeaten. One team is expected to be a state contender. The other, you're still kind of wondering just how good they are. I think Anson has established at this point they're going to be a likely playoff team, maybe a team that can win a game or two. This is going to give them an opportunity to really test themselves against the type of team that they'd need to beat to make a long run. So I'm intrigued by this one. I think it's kind of a matchup that's certainly worth keeping an eye on.
This is going to be by far, in a way, the toughest team that Anson has faced thus far this year. I think we know that. One thing that I would keep a close eye on for Anson early on is if they can get that push up front, if they can get some yards on the ground, I think they're going to give themselves a shot. If they have a hard time, if they're facing second and long all night, this is not the type of ball club you want to go up against and face second and long all night. It's going to be very important for Anson's offensive line to get that push. And to keep that clock rolling and give themselves a shot at moving the chain.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that I'm kind of most eager to see is you look at what Hamlin did to Hawley, a team that was really rolling offensively when they came into that matchup, completely shut them down. Albany, a team that was rolling offensively coming into that matchup, got completely shut down. Anson has looked good offensively so far. This will be a defense on a different level than any other they've faced this year. We'll see if they can move the ball a little bit. If they can't, it's going to be a long night. They're probably looking at a similar score to what Hawley and Albany did. So if I'm picking this game, I'm going with Hamlin. I think Hamlin will win it, but I do think there's some intrigue there to see how this Anson team can stack up. I think this is a very good measuring stick for them, and we'll find out exactly how good Anson is after this week.
All right, now let's move on to a top quality Class 3A matchup, Dan. And I know you like this matchup. This should be a dandy. Brock is going to be heading out to Iowa Park to face an unbeaten Iowa Park Hawk team that is scoring a bunch of points, is playing really well and playing good ball clubs. This Iowa Park team beat Canadian, for crying out loud. So these guys are for real. And Brock, 2-0, that has played lights out, is going up there. This might be the best game that we've got all week.
Yeah, I think this is really one of the better games on the slate statewide this week. I think this is a good matchup. I think it's one between two teams, obviously, that have had a lot of success already, two teams that are expected to be threats come playoff time. I think this is going to be the toughest matchup that Brock has had so far, especially when you have to make that type of trip up to Iowa Park. So I'm excited about this one. I think it's going to be a really fun one.
I don't look at this game as a shootout. Both teams are playing really well defensively. And granted, both teams can score in bunches, and both have. But Iowa Park, against a very good schedule, has only allowed 11 points per game. And Brock, against a very good schedule, has only allowed 7 points through two ball games, or an average of 7 points per game through two ball games. I look at this as going to be A tightly contested, lower scoring ball game where one or two mistakes might decide it. Maybe a special teams play.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that for sure. I think it is going to be one of those deals where you're talking about two teams that are really good on both sides of the football. So I could see this game stylistically going any number of ways, but I think it's going to be competitive. I think this will be far more competitive than certainly the games that Brock has played to this point, and probably a couple of those that Iowa Park has as well, because they've been pretty dominant as well. So I'm excited about this one. I think it's going to be a really fun matchup. I think that you're going to see two teams playing well, playing with a lot of confidence. Both are going to come in expecting to win. I'll go with Brock just because until somebody beats this Brock team, I'm convinced that this is a state championship team. So I'll go with Brock, but I think they will be tested in this one in a way that they haven't been to this point.
I'm going to go with Brock because they've just played so well, even above and beyond what was expected of them thus far. That game, that 55-7 win at Bushland was scary good. It was scary good. So I'm going to go with them, but this is going to be a great test for them, and this is going to be on the road. Iowa Park is not an easy place to play.
Staying in 3A, we've got a matchup that I don't think will be on a whole lot of people's radars just because of the records of the team involved, but I think it's worth talking about because I think both teams are better than their records show. So let's talk a little bit about that Eastland at Breckenridge game. A couple of teams that are looking for their first wins have done things a little differently to this point. Eastland's been scoring a little bit but struggling to make stops. Breckenridge has made a lot of stops. They played really well defensively but have yet to score. These are two former district mates. In that regard, I think this one's worth talking about. So what do you think? How do you see this one going?
I like Eastland. I just because of their offensive punch, I think they're going to be able to literally outscore Breck, who has not scored yet. They've been shut out 3 straight times, 13-0 by Jacksboro, 13-0 by Ballinger, and 14-0 last week against Cisco. But that is noteworthy because those are 3 very good teams that that Breckenridge has lost to. This is a much better team than 0-3, and I think it will demonstrate itself as the season progresses. This team is keeping itself competitive defensively and by playing a physical, clock-killing offensive style. They're staying very competitive. That means they're 1 or 2 turnovers away from sneaking up on somebody and pulling off an upset. So this game worries me if I'm Eastland. This game is going to be on the road against a team that's really not giving up very many points. And you go in there, Dan, and if you turn the ball over a couple of times and they're scoring, all of a sudden Breck is finding a way to score, especially defensively, with like a turnover or whatever, all of a sudden you're in trouble. Because he'd kill a lot of clock also with that offense. So to me, this game's worrisome for Eastland. But I do like them because I like them in the matchup because of their offensive firepower.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with Eastland as well. But the thing that stands out to me with this Breckenridge team is, they've continued a long-standing tradition out in Breckenridge and have scheduled just a loaded non-district slate. So they're playing really tough teams to open the season. And the other thing that I think has stood out a little bit is that they have struggled mightily to score. In fact, they haven't yet, but they have yet to lose a game by more than 2 scores. So they're competitive in all of these games with good teams, despite the fact that their offense really hadn't gotten going yet. So if they can ever kind of get their offense moving, find the end zone a couple of times, that's going to be a tough team to beat because defensively they're already there. So I kind of agree with you. I think that this is kind of a trap if you're Eastland. I think this is going to be a tougher game than it looks on paper. But I will go with Eastland to win this one just because I think that they've got a little more firepower on the offensive side. They don't struggle as much to move the ball. And if they do get down by maybe a touchdown early, you're not as worried about them. You're kind of overcoming that.
One thing to remember about there is one question mark. I want to see Breck's defense against a team that really spreads the field and throws it around. So far, they played ground and pound teams. Jacksboro's double wing. Cisco's an eye baseball club. Ballinger likes to keep the ball mostly on the ground. They throw it a little bit, but this is the first spread, up-tempo, throw it all over the place type football team that they have faced. So this will kind of demonstrate just where Breckenridge's defense is at this point.
And conversely, I think this is an opportunity for the Breckenridge offense to get going a little bit. Eastland's defense has not been as strong as those that Breckenridge has played. You mentioned the offensive styles of Jacksboro, Cisco, and Ballinger. Those are also excellent defensive teams. Eastland, I don't think I would put in that category right now. So this is an opportunity, I think, for Breckenridge's offense maybe to get going a little bit too.
All right, now let's move on to another matchup that we got coming up. I think this is going to be sort of we touched on this a little bit earlier. This is an interesting matchup. Clyde at Ballinger. Clyde coming off the big win over Riesel. Ballinger is coming in undefeated. They've knocked off Jim Ned on the road. They've beaten Breckenridge 13-0, and they beat Colorado City, of course, 34-2 last week. A struggling Colorado City team that's rebuilding at this stage. I want to see this Clyde offense and what it does against this Ballinger defense now that Clyde seems to be hitting its stride. This might be a fun matchup, and it might surprise some people as to what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm making a prediction, I'm going with Ballinger just based on the talent level they have and kind of the confidence they're playing with right now. But I think this is a dangerous matchup for him. So I think you're seeing a Clyde team that's starting to build some confidence, starting to build some identity, which I think was going to take a little bit of time. I mean, that was always going to be a kind of a process, just given how young they are. So if last week kind of helped them get there, I think this is going to be kind of a tough matchup for Ballinger, and that you're facing a team that's kind of finding its footing. And Ballinger is a very good football team. I'm going to start right there,
Yes.
but they're not a team that just kind of overwhelms you. They don't kind of bury you with a ton of points. They just play a really good, solid style of football. Play really good defense. Score enough to win. But they're not a team that's necessarily gonna snow you under. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup there, because I think it's going to be a more competitive game than a lot of people probably expect, and it's going to come down, I think, to who's able to make plays. So that's going to be kind of, I think, a fun deal.
Ballinger's averaging a modest 22 points per game, which is, I mean, that's modest, but they're only giving up 5 per game. This is a very good defensive football team, and they held this Jim Ned offense that we know is powerful. Given what they did to Eastland last week, they held Jim Ned to 14 points. This is a very stout defensive football team that Coach Lipsy has in Ballinger. But this will be a fun matchup to watch. I really want to see what Clyde's offense, their newly found offense, can do against this Ballinger defense. This Ballinger defense might be the best they've faced all year.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a good test on both sides of the football to kind of see just where Clyde stands at this point, and kind of see if they can build off the win over Riesel and see what they can do. But this is what I'm interested in. I think it's what I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this week.
And with that, Dan, it's time to talk about the Big Country Preps game of the week. We're heading to Chesley Field, the graveyard in Cisco, where the Lobos will be hosting the Jim Ned Indians. These are 2 proven commodities. These are 2 very good football teams. Jim Ned is 2 divisions above Cisco. So they've got the numbers, they've got the size, they've got the depth advantage. So the question to me is, can Cisco get off to that good start and hold on and beat them, which they might be able to, before depth really becomes a factor? Because we saw in the fourth quarter in Cisco's loss, 35-14 loss to Wall, that depth did eventually become a factor when you're facing a team that has that many more players than you do.
Yeah, and that's one of several things I'm looking forward to about this matchup, is that you've got that Wall game as kind of the measuring stick. And given the fact that Jim Ned shares a district with Wall and is considered by most to be their prime competition for the district championship, I think this is going to be kind of a good indicator of kind of where they stand. And then with Cisco, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. This is another opportunity for them to play a bigger school, one that we know is very good and is coming in off a huge win. I mean, they really dismantled Eastland, and I don't think anybody really – I picked Jim Ned to win. I don't think anybody expected Jim Ned to win the way they did. So this is going to be a matchup where you're facing a hot Jim Ned team, and it's an opportunity for Cisco to kind of play a larger team, one that you know is competitive, and I think it's going to be a good test for them, and it's going to be one that if they can come away with this one, again, we've said this several times throughout the year, but if you can go out and beat a Jim Ned, there aren't going to be many teams in Class 2A Division I that are going to be, considerably better than that.
Completely different in terms of style for Jim Ned. This Cisco Ball Club is completely different in what they faced last week against Eastland. This is a team that's going to line up and hit them in the mouth. And really, both clubs are physical. Jim Ned is bigger. They've got more depth. But I'm telling you, they're facing as bad a talented a Class 2A D1 team in the state as you're going to see. The Cisco team is going to do some harm in Class 2A D1. This is a very good D1, 2A D1 team. I'm interested to see what happens. We shall see. I think it's going to be I think the first half is going to be crucial for Cisco if they're going to pull off the win here. I am going to go with the Lobos. It's difficult to pick against them at Chesley Field.
Yeah, and I'm actually I think I'm going to go the other route. I picked Jim Ned, and they made me look smart last week. So I think I'm going to stick with Jim Ned. I think that they're playing at a really high level. They got that test against a Ballinger team that's really physical, really talented. I think that will help them in this one. But I think it is going to be very, very tough. I think Cisco at home especially, and that's one thing that scares me a little bit. I don't like to pick against Cisco at home. I think it's just going to be, again, just the depth issue. You're talking about playing two divisions up, a Gym Ned team that has a big roster, both physically and in numbers. I think that's going to be a tough test for Cisco. I think this one will go similarly to the Wall one in that it will be a very competitive game for 2 or 3 quarters, and I think that Jim Ned will outlast them. But I could very well be wrong with that one. I would not be surprised at all to see Cisco win this one, especially at home. But I think it's going to be a neat matchup. I think there's a lot of things to like about this matchup. I think it's a good pick for our game of the week. And I think it's one that you and I are both excited to see how it turns out.
It's not football season unless I make at least one trip to Chesley Field. That's just that's tradition. I go there at least once a year. This will be the week. Yeah. And with that, Dan, it's just about time to bring on our weekly guest. This week it's going to be Hamlin head football coach Russell Lucas. And I'll tell you what, Hamlin is looking about as good as we've seen them. And last year, I thought this is the best Hamlin team we've ever seen, ever and ever will see. But right now, the way they're playing with a 3-0 start, beating some good football teams in Hawley and in Albany most recently, both on the road in dominating fashion, they've been stunningly good to this point. Stunningly good, better than I thought they'd be.
And that's the crazy part is I think you can make a case that they've looked better this season than they did last year, certainly at this point in the season. I think they hit a stride in the playoffs where they were playing at a really, really high level. But I think they're there now.
People. I mean, they lost key people, Lozano being one of them.
But I think they've picked up right where they left off last year. They hit that stride in the playoffs where they were playing at such a high level and really could have beaten Martin in the state championship game. And they've really picked up right where they left off with some new kids stepping into some big roles. And I think that's a testament to the job that Coach Lucas has done. I'm excited to talk to him about that. I think he probably won't take as much credit as he deserves for getting this team to this level and for really getting some players ready to play in those positions. But I think he deserves a ton of credit for the program he's built, for the team he's built, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team can do this season because I don't see – to me, the sky's the limit. I think that this team has the ability to not only get to Arlington but to leave Arlington as winners if they can stay healthy and if they continue kind of building on what they're doing right now.
Well, you and I have both seen them, and I saw them at Hawley, and we know Hawley is a very good ball club, and Hamlin showed up very poised, very confident, and had that look that we showed up, we're going to win this ball game. And you saw the same thing last week against another proven commodity in Albany. And this is, to me, it's indicative of the program turning, not only that they've turned a physical corner a long time ago, but to me, it's indicative of them turning a mental corner. Because these are the types of wins, these big wins against really great ball clubs on the road that 5 or 6 years ago, even though Hamlin was good, you weren't going to see this happen.
And that's one thing I'm sure we're going to talk to Coach Lucas about, but it's just about time to get him on. So let's go ahead and add him to the Zoom call.
And joining us now via Zoom, it's Hamlin head football coach Russell Lucas. Coach, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just jumping right into the questions that we'd have for you. You guys are off to. I mean, we knew you were going to be good, but I think it's surprisingly good, dominant thus far. When you look at beating teams like Hawley and Albany in this fashion, this early, I think this is above and beyond what I expected, and maybe what Dan expected also. What's impressing you most thus far about the way your team is performing?
Well, everybody's talking about our defense, and that's been really good. Those guys. Anytime you have 14 seniors, and a lot of those guys have multiple years of varsity experience, that was the expectation, is that those guys would perform that way. But there's always the unknown. We had 5 months off. We didn't get to have a spring like we normally have. We didn't really. Some of those guys, we didn't see them in the summer like we wanted to. And so there was some concern that would we be able to perform like we are, and we're just excited the way they're performing at this point.
And Coach, you mentioned that defense and getting to see y'all in that win over Albany. I think that's probably what has impressed me the most, looking what y'all did in back-to-back weeks. And really, you can include the first week too, shutting out Stanford. So defensively, just doing just about everything right so far. What has kind of fueled that performance? What have you kind of seen from that group that's kind of that kind of stood out to you?
Just having 14 seniors play, I think that some of those guys have not had to be full-time defensive players. They were kind of offensive-minded. Braden, for example, Jackson, some of those guys played some defense, but I think I love the way that they're taking pride in the way they're having to play defense this year, and knowing that if we're going to be successful, that they've got to be that's got to be just as important to them as scoring touchdowns and all those other things. So super proud of those seniors for being two-way players and the way they're approaching it.
Coach, one thing that I noticed watching you play the other night against at Hawley a couple of weeks ago was the poise, the increase in poise that we're seeing from Braden Warner now. He's always been good. He was good as a sophomore, freshman, but now he's when you roll him out of the pocket, he's got such great touch and great poise and patience. Can you talk a little bit about that and how he's improved in that department?
Yeah, they talk about as you mature that the game kind of slows down for guys. And, for a guy that's been, I haven't counted him up, but he's probably already played in 40 football games, and he's just in the third game of his senior season. So, he's played in a lot of high school football games, and he spends a lot of time preparing for what he does. He goes to camps in the summer. He's got guys he works with. And, for a senior 4-year starter, that's what we expect out of him, but he is playing really well right now. He has the confidence right now, and he's a little stronger, he's a little faster. So that element of him being able to run the ball, to be able to be a threat with his feet is added a dimension for him that maybe we haven't used or haven't had in the past. So he's a complete player. We're very fortunate he's on our team.
Okay, and obviously, Coach, y'all lost several impact players from last year's state team, but have been able to really absorb those losses and move forward in a really positive way. Have there been any maybe surprises this year, maybe some kids that stepped up beyond the expectations you had for them?
Well, we have a couple of offensive linemen, and that's probably where the scariest thing coming into the season for us was we lost 3 really good senior offensive linemen last year that nobody really talks about. And, we have a sophomore and a junior that their very first varsity start. We had a senior that was going to start at center for us this year that we lost in the Hawley game to an ACL injury. So we have another junior playing in his first varsity year. So those 3 offensive linemen that are new have been key for us. Those skill guys like Austin and Javon that we lost. Javon's little brother, Travion, has really stepped up, and he's had some key catches against Hawley, had a couple of big catches Friday night against Albany. And, we just take it as next man up, and those guys are stepping up to that challenge. And then the guys that are returning, it's, they're a year older and a year more experience. And so we expect them to up their game as well, and we feel like they're doing that.
Okay. Coach, prior to the season, I thought preseason prognostications I thought the expectations were maybe a little too high after you go to Arlington for the first time last year, and then you lose Lozano, you lost Javon, a number of other key players. I thought that maybe they were a little too high, but as it turns out, maybe they weren't. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I'm always a little skeptical about all that anyway. I hate to talk about that kind of stuff about, can you repeat what you did? Because there's a lot of things that go into playing a state championship game. But we're off to a good start. It's going to be key. I've already mentioned that we lost one of our 2-way starters to an injury. And last year we were very fortunate. We played in the state championship game with the exact same team we played in game 1 in. And we're already probably not going to be able to do that. And so we won't be able to sustain very many of those type of injuries. There's just polls and predictions and all that kind of stuff, but I don't have that privilege. We just have to focus on our job and keeping these kids focused, because they are 16, 17-year-old kids, and if they get caught up in all that, they might forget to play one week, and we don't want to be in that boat.
And Coach, along those same lines, we talked about this after the game the other night, kind of balancing, that having that confidence and that overconfidence. But you look at what y'all were able to accomplish last year, brought a good group back from that team, what you've been able to accomplish so far. Just talk about the confidence level that this team's playing with and how you do kind of have to temper that just a little bit.
Yeah, and I keep going back to our seniors, and that group is really special because I don't really have to deal with that too much because they're a really intelligent group of kids. There's 14 of them, and I think there's 7 or 8 of them that are in the National Honor Society, and that goes a long way with that group of kids. And so they just don't get too high or too low, and I haven't had to manage that a lot. I've had teams that's really been a big deal that I have to manage their their confidence or their arrogance or whatever it be. And we just haven't had to deal with that so far this year. But, as a coach, that's my job, is to anticipate those kind of things. And so we just remind them daily and for sure weekly that we earn everything we get and that nobody's going to give us anything. And there's some teams out there that, maybe hadn't been there in a few years, like Wink or some of those teams that people are talking about, Windthorst. That they're not going to really care where we're ranked or where all those kind of things. And so we just can't get caught up in all that. It's an honor for us to be mentioned in the same conversation with those other people, but we do have to guard against that a little bit.
All right, Coach, and looking kind of more broadly at your program as a whole, what kind of impact have you seen from that trip to state last year, and in terms of maybe the impact on some of those younger kids that will be coming up in the future?
Well, a couple of things. One is we had 6 extra weeks of practice last week that some schools didn't get to have. So I think that's huge for your young kids to be involved in that. And then, just the atmosphere of a couple of those games, when you get to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and then obviously that state championship game, there's just a lot of things that a lot of kids don't get to experience. And, that trip to Arlington, there were probably half our team had never even been to the outside of that building, much less to the inside of that building. And so that was huge for our kids. Just to be able to have that type of experience. And it has shown up a little bit this year in the fact that, we've played in a couple of big games that, you guys we were the game of the week for a couple of different people 2 weeks in a row. And I just never felt like our kids really got tight or got up, There was some years back that would have been a big deal around here, and it was a big deal, but it wasn't the biggest thing they've ever experienced. And so they just kind of took it in stride, and that I love seeing that kind of confidence in that. It just didn't; those kind of situations didn't overwhelm them.
You've almost answered our next question, Coach, because you have gone into 2 very difficult places to play, Albany and Hawley. One in dominating fashion, and in Albany in particular. Let's be honest. Even though like 5, 6, 7 years ago, you had turned a corner as far as being a quality program, going to Albany 6, 7 years ago and coming away with a win, especially in a dominating fashion, was not going to happen. It just wasn't. But it's almost as if your program has turned another corner, if possible, mentally. They went there Friday expecting to win.
Yeah, they absolutely did. Again, I keep saying it. Those seniors, they just they have that confidence. They've had it since they were young. They just believe that when we suit up, that we're supposed to win. They didn't feel like they were underdogs last year in the state championship game. They were looking at the 2-time defending state champions. I think Rodrell Freeman is one of the finest running backs I've ever seen play football. And our little old kids just tackled him left and right because that's what they're supposed to do. And so it does your heart good to watch a bunch of kids believe in something and go out and play like that. And they're to the point now that they believe they're supposed to win every time they go out there. I'm not going to tell them any different. I'm just going to remind them that it does happen. And we've been on the end of some of those, and but they do have a lot of confidence right now, and they're a fun group to coach.
When you look at the program that you took over, the time that you've spent at Hamlin, you look at where this program is now, I guess just to kind of reflect on that journey to get here and kind of what it's meant to you to get them from where they were to where you are now, and just the progress that program has made in general.
Well, head coaches probably always get a little too much of one or the other. They get too much blame when things aren't great, and they get too much credit when things are good. Because I've had some, good coaches get on the buses with good athletes. We've had some great athletes come through school here since I've been here. I've also had some really good assistant coaches. This is a great community to coach football in. They expect us to work their kids hard. There's an expectation there of the kind of work we're going to put in as a coaching staff and the kind of work we're going to expect from our kids. And I think it was just the perfect storm of the time that I showed up. All those things were in place, and we've been able to sustain that, which is difficult because for whatever reason, coaches tend to be migratory. Either something better comes along or somebody gets dissatisfied on one end or the other. And it's just been a great place for our family, and we love this community, and they have responded well to us. And it's just been a lot of fun watching these kids, because this group of seniors that I have now, they were in kindergarten when I showed up here. And so I'm the only football coach they've ever known, and every kid in our program, when they think about, who's going to be their coach, they all just assume it's going to be me, and hopefully it will for time to come. But it is fun to be a part of something that you can see grow, and I feel like you've at least got your fingerprint on it. But there's a lot of people responsible for the success that we've had, and I'm just glad to be a part of that.
Coach, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be keeping an eye on you as always, and best of luck the rest of the way.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Coach.
And that was Hamlin head football coach Russell Lucas. Dan, how do you feel about this? Are you surprised at how good Hamlin is? I don't know. I'm somewhat surprised, especially after losing Lozano, who was so dominant on both sides of the ball. I thought that they were going to be very good, but not quite as good. But they're looking like they have a shot at being as good as they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could maybe make a case that they're looking at this point in the season better than they did last year. So that's kind of crazy to think about.
Defensively, especially.
Given what they lost with Austin Lozano, with Javon Williams, who was such a weapon for them last year, I think I probably am a little surprised that they're this dominant. I thought they'd be very good. I thought they'd have a chance to make another deep playoff run. Right now, I think that if you look on paper, I mean, this to me, this region and this division looks like it's going to be another deal where you've got kind of a collision course right now with Mart and Hamlin. That's not to say that things couldn't happen that could change that, but I think if you look on paper right now, those two teams look like clear favorites to get to Arlington. And I'm not sure I necessarily thought that would be the case for Hamlin, given what they lost. So I think that you've got to be very, very impressed with what they put together. And to some degree, I think there is some surprise there. But if I was a Hamlin fan right now, I'd be pretty excited about what they've got and what they're doing, because
they're going to have to stay healthy. Yeah,
that's true. And that's true of anybody in Class 2A Division II. That's true of every team there. Major injuries could derail anybody's season when you're talking about a roster of, 25, 30 kids. But if Hamlin can stay healthy, I right now I'd see them getting a rematch with Mart in the state championship game, which is pretty exciting to be able to kind of to see that and to be able to look forward to that. And again, things can change, and you don't want to be penciling in, state championship games in early September. But right now, just with the body of work that both have shown, I think that Mart and Hamlin are above everybody else in that division.
All right, with that, it's just about time to wrap up tonight's Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you that we have 3 subscription packages at Big Country Preps. We've got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription where we knock that price down to $4 a month. And then we've got a yearly subscription where we knock that price down to $3 a month, $36 for a full year of Big Country High School athletic coverage.
We'd also like to remind you that if you see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, it is available for purchase for just $7. You can click on that small shopping cart icon to the bottom right, follow the prompt, and you can purchase as many of those as you like. But if you've been clicking around the site, you've probably noticed we take a lot of photos here, and you can find a lot of those in our photo archive, which is being updated daily. So check those out, and then make sure you purchase any of those that you like, because those photos are something we're real proud of here at BigCountryPreps.com.
All Big Country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.